Today on Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out, we're talking about the Pledge of Allegiance. Have you ever spoken up and been shut down in a group you belong to? Do you find yourself shaking your head reading comments on social media that simply regurgitate the party line? Are you tired of feeling like everyone around you is deeply divided? Learn to be aware of your allegiances and the negative effect they may be having as we wrap up our month focusing on living life fully. Do you control your clutter, or does your clutter control you? On Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out, we'll teach you awareness as well as action steps to create change in your life. Come on, let's get started. Today we're going to talk about groups we belong to, allegiances we may have. If you are so strongly aligned with the group, you can create mental clutter because you'll lose clarity. If you're always towing the company line, you're not thinking for yourself, that's not good mentally. You can create emotional clutter if you're told things are a certain way, or you can't feel this way or respond that way. Spiritually, you're limiting yourself. Instead of following your individualized path, honoring yourself, you limit yourself when you do everything that the group says. It can create conflict in relationships. If you're staying angry all the time, that's not good for your health. It can create financial clutter if you belong to a bad group and all they want is your money all the time, 24/7, and you're a bad person if you don't donate. Today's episode was inspired by a listener who got so upset with me that they went over to YouTube to comment. And they didn't comment on the right video. And I said, why didn't you comment on the right video? And they said they couldn't find it. She was not happy with my calling in episode, which was from February of this year. And I went back and listened to it. And I thought, okay, well, let me listen before. I said, I'll go back and listen to it. And I had made a comment along the lines that this current administration had caused the deepest divide in our country since the Civil War. And we went back and forth, and I said, I stand by that statement. There are historians, political historians that agree with me, and I think most people would think that was an accurate statement. And she said it's the, quote, loser left, unquote, and a couple other things that have created this divide. Now, I want you to really pay attention here. I said the current administration. I didn't say Republican. I didn't say right. And one, I apologize, we're even skimming the topic of politics because this is not what this podcast is about. But with the larger issue of Pledge of Allegiance, this is probably the most potent example that I have. She said loser left. I didn't ascribe it. I don't believe the current administration, in my mind, definitely not duality. I don't think that I don't consider them conservative. I don't consider them to the right. I don't consider them Republican. And I would say that in the opposite end, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, if they were so radically different than anything we'd ever had before. But she immediately went to loser left, right? She was pledging allegiance because her side says demonize the other side. We are the right ones, but these people are awful. They're snowflakes. They're whatever. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Instead of having a more neutral term saying, you know what, wow, there's deeply division. And you might argue, well, it's not by this administration. But it wasn't about me attacking one side, and the other person did. And to me, that was a perfect example. Again, it's loser left. Anyone who thinks differently than me is wrong. And that's scary. At least to me it is. I know it's scary to other people. It was also inspired by, I have a friend I've known a really long time, and she pledges her allegiance to her ethnicity and her very tight-knit community. if you don't fall within those parameters, you're never going to be part of that inner circle. And once she made a comment about a kraut. I have German ancestry. And that was just so weird to me because I hadn't heard the term kraut in, I don't know, ever. I had known about it. And so for someone to call me that, even in a joking way, just showed me where their thinking was. I don't think of myself as a German American. That's just not how I think. And again, with my belief system, I've probably been, hopefully, experienced every ethnicity and all that there is to offer. But she's so tight-knit that anything outside of that, you know, there'll always be this divide. And I don't think that's healthy. And then finally, once when I was a sophomore in high school, I asked a question in church and I was shut down. Now, I wasn't being smarmy. I was asking, I don't understand. And what I felt was a fair, educated question. And they shut me down. I don't think I ever went back after that. I just thought, if you can't have a thoughtful discussion, I'm not interested. So what are my allegiances? The biggest one I'm going to talk about is Steelers football, right? We know who we love and we know who our least favorite teams are. Now, I'm joking about this, but let's give an example. I'll give an example of my least favorite team, the New England Patriots. Look how crazy people went defending Tom Brady and Deflategate. You know, I always like those creative people out there that make these maps, and they had created a little meme, and it had like, who believes Tom Brady and the Patriots, and it had Massachusetts. I don't even think maybe it included New England, and then it had the rest of the country. It was quite clever. And I'm joking, but seriously, you know, when the Steelers had Michael Vick and they put him as backup quarterback for a year, I didn't watch that year. I was so upset. I believe everyone gets a second chance. I didn't agree with it in this particular place. Don't play pro ball. Maybe you get your second chance elsewhere. That's just my personal opinion. You might disagree with me on that and say the guy did deserve a second chance. And I might say someone deserves a second chance and you don't agree with that. And that's okay. But what I'm saying in this example is, as much as I love the Steelers, when they hired Michael Vick, I didn't think that was the right decision. I wasn't happy when they kept Ben Roethlisberger after everything that went down, because I personally believe both of the women that accused him. Now, what I had heard, and which was probably, I believe, probably true, is they tried to release him, but no other team would take him, which you understand that. And I think in general, the Rooneys are good people. And so I will believe that story. Is that the truth? I don't know. It seems reasonable to me. But I was like, trade him. Get him out. I don't want him as a Steeler anymore. Am I thrilled he's a Steeler? No. So I didn't blindly say, oh, Ben's innocent. And if you look at Deflategate, you go, oh, no, Tom, it's just you're coming after the Patriots. We just win all the time. You don't like it. Deflategate's not real. But that's another prime example. Look how people responded to that. They are so pledged to the Patriots. And the same with Steelers. There are people that defended Ben. They thought he was innocent, and women were going after him. But they couldn't. Their blinders were so great, they refused to see anything else. And because they had pledged allegiance, they couldn't go against that. So obviously, we see the most of this in politics. And I am ready for this to be done. I love snowflakes, and that has been ruined for me because of its use and abuse. And I hope that we are going to let that word go, because it just drives me absolutely nuts. I'm ready to move back to West Virginia when we hopefully see real, multiple, beautiful snowflakes to bring back the joy for me. Because right now I hear that word and I cringe. And it's not just politics, and it's not just sports team. I mentioned my friend, it was all about her ethnicity and her religion. That was her allegiance. It might be atheists versus those who believe in God. Western versus Eastern medicine. Really think about this for a moment. Where else do you see it? I know you see it. And there's a difference between, for instance, I believe in Eastern medicine. Oh my gosh, guys, I can't wait to share some plant stuff with you. I've just been blown away. But I'm still getting surgery. Now, there are probably perhaps people who are in the class, I don't know, that might think, wow, loser, you should try everything you can to avoid surgery. It's to the point I can't. It's been canceled twice now, and I've got to do it. And if 10 years ago I'd learned about plants, well, I wouldn't have known. Well, that's not true. 10 years ago, we would have known about the lump, and we maybe could have tried something, but it is what it is. And so my point is, I'm not so set on Eastern medicine that I'm willing to throw out Western medicine. So hopefully those were some examples that'll get you thinking in your own life and observe. Really, social media is a great teacher. You'll see people, what do they get so that they just latch on to? Now, pledging the allegiance, having your group, back in the day, it was about survival, right? You have safety in numbers, you can divvy up chores. And most of us, as human beings, have a real need to belong. So it makes sense that we would be loyal to our groups, right? But in some cases, and it's become more prevalent, that goes off the rails. And truthfully, I feel like that's how it is in the United States here. But the good news about this is, I truly believe this, that most of the people that are rabid, crazy, nutso supporters are shrinking. I don't believe there are as many people in this mindset as we would believe. I think the squeaky wheel gets oiled. Start to pay attention. Do you see the same people posting on social media? Now, I personally believe that there are definitely, what do they call, bots or whatever, that they're paid people to incite you and get you angry. Absolutely happening. But I really believe when you step back and look at it, that most people aren't so crazy allegiant. And, you know, with the current administration is a perfect example. The Lincoln Project is comprised of Republican conservatives who are opposed to the current administration. They think they have gone against the values of what Republicans stand for. So they have said, hey, we're Republicans, but we're not pledging our allegiance to this current administration. So that's another really good example. And hopefully I won't have any more political examples. I don't like politics. This is not the place for it. And I think I really have avoided that. But it's unfortunately the best example of what we have. So where does it go wrong? Now, if we were talking about extreme allegiance, that would be ethnic cleansing. We're not going to talk about that today. Mentioned politics, and I've mentioned ethnicity, I've mentioned medicine, I've mentioned religious, like God versus atheist. So it goes off the rails when it fosters bullying and scapegoating. And I want to talk a moment about this. One thing I'll never forget, I love 60 Minutes, and I haven't watched TV fairly regularly. We've become binge watchers, and I will binge watch a show and then so I don't have to deal with commercials. Anyway, I think 60 Minutes, I like those news shows. I haven't watched it, but I'll never forget this. Gosh, it's probably in Raleigh, maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years. And they had, I believe it was in Tennessee or Kentucky, and they had a stadium, and people were out there in the middle of the night lined up for free dental care. I think it was just dental care. Might have been medical care, but I definitely remember the dental care. These are the working poor. And some had heard about it, driven from miles away. And these people, the medical professionals, had donated their time. There was a huge line. And, you know, I remember someone not getting the care they needed and just being heartbroken. We demonize the poor in this country, and I'm not okay with that. And that interview was a perfect example. We have a lot of working poor in this country, and shame them, blame them, and that's what I mean. And then we demonize them, and that's continued to happen. So if you're in a group that has the belief that all poor people are lazy, for example, there are people out there that believe that. That's what I'm talking about. So it scapegoats someone. It demonizes people. And that is not healthy. When you're uniting out of anger, jealousy, and spite, that's where it's a problem. It's not good for us as a community, as a country, as a nation, as a world. Because if you are uniting out of anger, and then you're angry all the time, how does that help you? You're not going to heal yourself. You're just sitting in that anger, and everything feeds off of each other. And so what that does, it brings up unconscious behavior and attitudes like screaming. It can include just being closed-minded. You're wrong. I'm not going to entertain any other point of view. I have always said I have zero problem if someone wants to have a discussion with me. I have zero problem with that. And, you know, the woman at the end of the thing on YouTube said, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. And again, if she had come out with, well, this is what I believe, but when you do loser left and start calling names, I'm out of there. That tells me right then and there, you are aligned with a group mentality and I'm not convinced that's your individual thought. And if you have to defend it like that, you're doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm not all right with that. So it brings out, in addition to screaming and getting bent out of shape and refusing to see another perspective, it goes to bring out violence, the dogmatic behavior. If you're willing to run over people in a crowd with your car because you disagree so vehemently with what they're standing for, what they're protesting, I don't care where you are on whatever spectrum. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. But it's within you. It can't come out if it's not within you. Unfortunately, this also creates inaction. And all you have to do is look at the United States government. All they do is fight, give themselves more money, and don't do anything to make our country better. They are doing a snow job on us. Left versus right. As they enrich themselves, they enrich their lobbyists, and they don't take care of us. And we have fallen prey to the biggest snow job probably the country's ever seen. I don't believe politicians are in it for the real reasons. Maybe a couple people. The last politician I really felt that kept it real was Bill Bradley, who was a former NBA player. I read his autobiography. I believe he was genuine. I'd have to really sit down and do some investigation. Some people mistakenly believe that you're either born organized or you aren't. That's not true. Getting organized and clearing clutter, as well as learning to be more mindful and aware, is a skill that you can learn and will support you your entire life. Julie Coraccio's online classes and workshops are broken down into smaller chapters, each with manageable steps and action items for you to implement, in video and audio. Visit reawakenyourbrilliance.com to learn more. But look at the inaction we have. I don't care. I'm not going to work with you because you're on the other side. That's what a 5-year-old does. So right now, as I record this, they left. I can't remember if they came back or they're supposed to come back, and said, oh, well, millions of people are unemployed. Oh, well, we didn't solve it. We're going to go take our break. Well, I can't concede to that because that's from the other side, even if I think that that makes sense. So because of that, millions of Americans are suffering who could use that extra amount in their paycheck. You stay stagnant. You're not growing. A lot of the times with these allegiances, you're steeped in anger. I think of a friend who's been years and is still so bitter about her divorce, she hasn't moved on. So you become angry, bitter, and anything outside of your group is seen as bad. Doesn't matter, and you might be thinking back in your mind, wow, that really makes sense to me. I'd like to try it. But the group says no. And you follow that. You don't grow. You stay stagnant. That's not a place that you want to be consciously. I hope that if you really just sit down and think about it. Checking your loyalty. See, do an honest assessment and look at groups that have a foundation of hate, anger, judgment. As I mentioned earlier, that builds on what you already have inside. If you don't have it inside, you can't build on that. I've always said if you judge another, you have judgment against yourself. If you hate another, you have hate against yourself. Because if you didn't have it within you, you couldn't do it. Stand up to hate, false information. I'm rarely on Nextdoor, which, I just call a new way to dislike your neighbors. So a couple of days ago, I'm working because I was in West Virginia, and so when I come back, I have to work several days. I only answer emails. I can't, at this point, can't do anything else. So I was in West Virginia for 9 days. So I'm checking my email, and this email comes through in this post. And I said, let me read this. So it was a racist post, and it had stated factually incorrect information. And so I flagged it. This is racist. It's false. Information in the comments are just factually incorrect, and it needs to be removed. And I said, I'm disturbed at the amount of propaganda I see where I live. I find it deeply disturbing. Well, apparently I wasn't the only one, because then it came through. I saw a post later, third time posting, I'm going to keep posting. And, they ended up kicking him off Nextdoor. Now, normally, I don't believe in expending my energy on that. And one thing I check in, how am I feeling? What is it that I feel the need to do? However, if I see something that's blatantly wrong, blatantly false, I have to stand up to that. And I think more than ever, all of us have to do that. Even if you're shy like me, and if you know that it's not your job to be in the trenches and front line. We had a disturbing experience that happened in our neighborhood before I moved here, and no one stood up to it. And I said to the woman, well, what did the neighbors do? Nothing. I said, did you post online? Yes. She said several weeks later, one person posted a really lame response. That breaks my heart that no one in the neighborhood stood up to that. And so if you see that, I'm going to encourage you to stand up to it and then really start listening. What are people saying? Listen to what your group says. Listen, watch for the tone. You might be thinking, oh, there's really not anger here, but then listen what they say. Is it coming? You can tell them I'm angry. Measure empathy. How empathetic are you towards people? If we take the perspective we're all in this together, then I can see you as my friend instead of my enemy. How can I connect with you? I did this great podcast interview yesterday, and he was from West Virginia, and I had been in West Virginia, and I said, you have 304 area code in West Virginia. And he said, yeah, I'm from Beckley. He said, I was in New Jersey and moved back home. Anyway, we ended up doing an interview, and he said, I was so happy that you decided to interview with me. I didn't think you would. He said, I heard your podcast. I said, I'm going to go for an interview. And I said, oh, I'm so glad you did. And I said, I would rarely turn down an interview. I said, I don't think I ever have. I said, there would have to be something huge for me to say no to someone. And so I connected with someone that I'd never met. You could say we definitely came from different backgrounds, but we found so much commonality. Reach and see how you connect, because it's very rare, I think, that we can't find someone. We might not get along with someone personality-wise, but that's completely different. We might not just gel, but we could both have a shared belief of protecting the environment. There's a difference between not getting along from a personality perspective and then finding that way to connect. So measure your empathy. Do you? Be an individual. Stand up when you see something wrong. If no one stands up, we get Nazi Germany. That's what happened. The Germans were like, oh, this doesn't seem right, but we're not going to say anything. And again, I wasn't there. I don't believe I was there. Never has been on my radar for any past life stuff. It's not about judgment, but it's about being realistic and saying, okay, if we don't stand up, this is what can happen. So challenge what people in your group say. If it doesn't feel right to you as an individual, stand up, be you. Don't thwart your feelings, your perspectives, your individuality. That's really important, because when you get swallowed by the group, you lose who you are. And you can understand how easily people can get swayed and how they can get caught up in something. You know, I was telling someone years ago, before he was president, I saw Bill Clinton speak in Vermont. And boy, is he a gifted orator. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone else. And I understand how people are mesmerized by him. I can't think of any other example where I've seen someone speak and just have this charisma. And so I understand how people can get swept up by a charismatic leader. And I didn't with him, but I understood it because I experienced it. And, you know, I'm able to step back and try to be neutral and see things with all possibilities and perspectives fairly well, but I understand it. So if you find that that's you, how can you get the individual you? How can you get yourself back? Don't assume. I ended up last night, Tony and I went for our constitutional, we do after dinner, and ended up talking to our next door neighbor. And he had upset me because he had posted about a cat, and we ended up having this conversation. He had brought it up, and I learned more about how he had to give away a pet when his first child was born. And he said how the pet did this, and he cleaned it up because he said that's what a responsible pet owner was. And I understood more of his perspective, and I had assumed something, and he did like animals. And so that was a good reminder to you. Yeah, you assumed some there, Julie. So maybe you need to remember that again. Yes, you're passionate about animals, and great. Thankfully, you were able to save the cat and make sure it didn't get euthanized. But you need to not assume and entertain other perspectives. Right? I think that those are both kind of go hand in hand and really important. Travel. Now, you might think that's an odd thing to talk about, but get outside of your neighborhood, get outside of your community. When you do that, you meet people. I'm always fascinated. I love to travel. We're homebodies, but we like to travel. So we can go and enjoy a place. Hopefully in 2021, maybe we'll travel and then come back to our home. But I always love learning things about cultures and food and what people think and what are customs and all of that good stuff. But that allows you to learn about people, be curious, be interested, and that's where you can find connection as well. Don't assume because someone's from another country. You know, we had a horrific thing happen to someone in a group I'm a part of, and they spit on her. This is in America, spit on her and made a comment about coronavirus. Not okay. Absolutely not okay. And that's what I'm talking about. First of all, she's American. So you assumed so much about her. That tells me who you are. Do I trust the Chinese government? Absolutely not. I'm sure they had more coronavirus cases than they said, but I don't hold that against the Chinese people. In fact, I have empathy for them. Wow, what would it be like to have a government that so the world can see just is not cool and is most likely lying to you and monitors what news you're allowed to read and see and really tries to tell you how to think? If you travel, then instead of getting upset, wow, I went to Spain once, boy, the people were nice, I have to remind myself that's the government. That's a small group of people. That's not who we are. Because really, I think most of us are good humans. We're decent, kind people. If you want to be angry, it's a select view of the government. So travel. If you're in a group that's really negative, or maybe has a lot of anger or hate, or maybe it's new and you just see that those seeds are starting to be planted, how can you turn that around and build it up? If you're a Steelers fan, maybe you do a community day. Let's clean up the neighborhood. Let's do something and give back. If you are very passionate about politics and have started campaigning in a local office, and the person says, tell everyone you know the other candidate stinks and here's why. Maybe you can say, hey, you know what? Maybe that's not the way to approach it. Maybe we can tout all the good stuff our person does. Change it around. You have the ability to do that. And if people say, no way, then maybe you have to rethink if that's something you want to be a part of. You will find the people you need. Trust me. There have been times in my life where I belonged to something and then it's changed and it didn't feel right and I've left it, but that void is always filled. And even if you can't find someone in person, try to find something online. Now, I don't believe in doing anything at the expense of, in what do the kids say, IRL in real life. We're in a really weird time. You know, I was saying to someone that I would like to Zoom to feel some connection where you're still really not getting out there a lot. So if you do it there, and then maybe that's someone you do a local group. So once things lift, you can go out and hang out in person. And finally, be kind. You have a choice. A couple weeks ago, I think it's now been, I got really upset. I was in one of my Facebook groups and someone is a friend of mine and this woman went off on her. And I said, well, first of all, she's new to Facebook, so maybe she cut her some slack. So every time I'd say something, attempting to be kind or attempting to be neutral and not, it wasn't to start an argument, but it was also defending my friend, you know, tit for tat, blah, blah, like wouldn't entertain anything else. And then finally I said, when you put someone's job in quotes, that's a slam. And then they said, well, I'll take that out. And I said, you know what? You're just a mean girl. Own it. Just own that you are a mean person because that's what you are. It's because at this point, I said, you can't own anything. Just own it being mean. Your whole comment is mean. Don't be like that. It takes the same amount. It actually takes more energy to be mean. So choose to be kind. Take action from today's podcast. Determine who you're loyal to. Notice why you like groups and what connects you. Pay attention to any negatives of your allegiances. Contemplate in life when your loyalty has cost you something. Be aware when you stop thinking for yourself. Measure your empathy. Don't assume. Entertain other perspectives. Own your individuality. Stand up against hate. Be kind. Pledge your allegiances to healthy and supportive groups. Next month, we're talking about wrapping up the end of 2020. Go out, clear your clutter to create the life you choose, deserve, and desire. When you clear your clutter, you can share your gifts with the world. Sign up for our free newsletter at reawakenyourbrilliance.com. If you've enjoyed Clear Your Clutter Inside and Out, please rate, review, and share us.